Welcome to the chaos sector. We return to the matrix. Does everyone understand what's at stake in this year's presidential election in the United States? Some may think we're picking on Kamala Harris, but she's a big girl. Mainstream media accuses the Trump ticket of bigotry and even racism, alluding to the criticisms of Harris being rooted in sexism. Oh, she's a woman. Here comes a white male mansplaining, making derogatory statements about her. Trump called her incompetent. And honestly, she hasn't displayed, let's just say Harris is not too gifted in the articulate department. There's nothing wrong with being a straight shooter, someone who just explains things in a very basic, fundamental manner. Actually, it's best to express yourself that way. That's what made Trump popular. His language is straightforward. But Harris seems to have a problem with her thought process, which we've picked up on. Everyone thought old Joe was bad, but Harris is not a spring chicken neither. Perhaps she's suffering from some mental deterioration. Wait a minute, I think I know what it could be. Marijuana. Yep, that seems to be what's wrong here. Stuttering, mental lapses, momentary pauses, and the infamous laughing Harris is known for. Her whimsical attitude, as if she's attending some San Francisco drag queen event instead of running for president of the United States. Yes, completely different mind states. One is about having fun, while the other is about making sure the entire country is stable and safe, by the way. Some would say, oh, she's just happy all the time, or, she won't let the circumstances stress her out. Well, let's go back to her interview with Lester Holt regarding the border, because this was an indication that Harris may be suffering from some sort of mental issue.
There's one other topic I wanted to talk to you about. Let me just quickly put a button.
Okay.
Do you have any plans to visit the border?
I'm here in Guatemala today. At some point, we are going to the border. We've been to the border. So this whole thing about the border, we've been to the border. We've been to the border.
You haven't been to the border.
And I haven't been to Europe. And I don't understand the point that you're making. I'm not discounting the importance of the border.
Well, I mentioned it because you've been...
Now, when the interviewer stated Harris hadn't been to the border, her response was she hadn't visited Europe. Now, clearly, this was one of the worst responses ever in the history of political discourse because of the context. She is equating Europe, a foreign country, with the United States border, which she was assigned to oversee as border czar. And it's even more wacky that Harris holds the second most powerful position in the nation as the vice president. Instead of responding in a dismissive manner, she could have stated, quote, yes, I know, but I'm in Guatemala right now. I have a few press briefings, and I'm scheduled to visit the border next week. Don't worry, we're going to fix the problem, unquote. Rather, she deflected from the statement when she didn't have to.
We've been to the border.
You haven't been to the border.
And I haven't been to Europe.
Just take the criticism and ensure that you will address it. And that lack of honesty, and even being sarcastic about a very serious issue in the country, shows her character is not trustworthy. But what do you expect from corrupt politicians? Obviously, there's national scrutiny of Harris not being effective in her role as border czar, so the appropriate response is to ensure that you are doing your job, or you are preparing to do that job. Not respond with sarcasm. Because you know what that tells the American people? You know what that tells the border states who are dealing with that crisis? You know what that tells Border Patrol who are being overwhelmed? Oh, I'll visit the border when I'm ready. Never mind the criminal activity and illegal immigrants flooding those small towns. You see? That's the vice president being whimsical, aloof, dismissive, not caring, not taking the job seriously. But see, her inflammatory statements in the past about ICE magnifies that careless attitude about the border. If you recall, she equated the ICE agency to the KKK. Now, if you're claiming a federal government agency, which is a part of Homeland Security, I repeat, Homeland Security, is similar to a hate group being the KKK, then what does this say about her views and policies about actually fixing the problem at the border? You need assistance from ICE to crack down on illegal immigration, yet you publicly slander them and discredit the hard work and service they provide to keep Americans safe. And through her language, and that response to Lester Holt, it proves Harris condones the illegal activity because she hasn't done anything to stop it. Now again, going back to the executive orders in this administration, old Joe signed several executive orders, which included non-citizens, which includes illegal immigrants, on the United States Census. This is actually a violation of the United States Constitution, And as we've pointed out, it leans towards possible treason. Sovereignty is naturally given to a nation's people because they are born in that land or nation. But if someone who was not born in that land, nor has become naturalized, is given sovereignty, it's a threat to national security by way of a president's executive orders. And Harris has been complicit with this violation, as she was not only the border czar, but she was the vice president. They've done so much for illegal immigrants, while American citizens are struggling to make ends meet. In states like New York, illegal immigrants were housed in hotels, provided weekly funds for groceries and other personal expenses. In San Francisco, where Harris is from, London Breed invested millions of taxpayers' dollars to fund her housing project, that of course included illegal immigrants. Let me touch on this once again, so people understand what's truly going on. Democrats claim that Trump and Republicans want to separate families by deporting illegal immigrants. Well, I would say at least 40% of those children cross the border as foster children, meaning the females that are seen carrying them are not their mothers, not the aunts, not the sisters, cousins, or even family friends. They are strangers, to be honest. Of course, we can say the primary objective for the children is to get them into the country away from crime. But on the other hand, cartels and gangs use the children as bargaining fodder, essentially kidnapped and used as hostages. The hierarchy of the coyote system: patrones, cuidandonos, checadores, and vaquetones. Patrones are the highest in rank. They manage the finances and business operations. They own hotels, safe houses, and vehicles used to smuggle immigrants to their destination. Cuidandonos are the caretakers. Younger individuals, usually high school students, are hired to distract Border Patrol agents to help immigrants get across. Interesting enough, most of them are American citizens hired to do this job. Checadores, or the eagles of the organization, act as the eyes and ears, keeping an eye out at checkpoints and Border Patrol areas, signaling immigrants to cross safely. And the vaquetons, or the recruiters, they recruit migrants within their communities at the interior of the country. Their recruits appear to be the cuidandonos, or the American high schoolers who are hired to carry out those jobs provided by the organization. All have roles in smuggling immigrants across the border. The females you see with children could be the mothers of those children, or it could be a coyote disguised as the mother. And it's difficult to determine if they're related because there is no way to know until they are processed. And if they aren't related, the child is accepted and the female is deported.
And more unaccompanied migrant children come from Guatemala than anywhere else.
Over 16,000 unaccompanied children tonight in custody. What's victory look like in this, or what does improvement look like?
Yeah, no, that's a great.
Those unaccompanied minors are a prime example of how the operation is carried out. See, instead of having adults accompany those children, the coyotes transport the minors just close enough, and then the minors travel the rest of the way on their own, of course being somewhat guided. But when they arrive at the United States border, they are unaccompanied, so Border Patrol has a moral obligation to accept them. In some cases, if not most, there are young females that accompany children, who are in fact coyotes. But of course, the objective was complete, getting the child into the country. It's a bonus if the female makes it through. And Harris visited those countries. Heck, she was briefed on the human and drug trafficking that is being carried out, which lands at the United States border's doorstep. This is why it's so damaging to her chances at becoming president, well, among other things. But it's her lack of taking action. See, we could give her the benefit of the doubt if Harris actually visited the border several times, held several press briefings with Border Patrol, ICE, held press conferences about some comprehensive plan or policy that introduced a new immigration strategy and cracked down on illegal immigration. Saying "don't come" is not a policy, it's not a strategy, it's not a plan. It doesn't crack down on illegal immigration. Because soon after she made that statement, in which most of the people she's speaking to didn't know what she said anyway, wait. And that's even more of a problem. Why didn't she have a translator who spoke in Spanish to relay that message? Yes, it would be more meaningful if there was someone telling those immigrants and illegal immigrants not to come in their own language. Yet, for Harris to say it, well, me, no speak English. No offense, but that's how it turned out. Now, getting back to the issue regarding marijuana. If you recall, in a previous episode, we broke down the negative effects that marijuana has on the brain and brain function. One of the major effects is the inability to coherently articulate yourself. due to the effect marijuana has on your ability to collect information and process it, well, within a reasonable time. This is why most stoners have a hard time comprehending, because brain cells have deteriorated over time. Yes, your brain cells deteriorate from smoking marijuana. Your brain cells deteriorate using any drugs for that matter. Any chemical that enters the body travels to the brain. The brain is like a computer, and chemicals or drugs are viruses dumped onto the computer. And what happens when there are viruses in the computer? It slows down, you see? Harris's brain has been affected by either marijuana or some prescription drug that keeps her in a blissful state of mind. Old Joe was drugged up because, well, he's old. But Harris's lack of concern, lack of truly grasping her job as vice president, and definitely not grasping the reality of potentially becoming the president, is clear to everyone. Her running mate in Tim Walz is obviously on something. No offense, but he appears to be a cocaine kind of guy. Anyone who signs executive orders to kidnap children from parents who don't agree with liberal ideologies has to be on some type of drugs. I guess we can say that about most liberals. Well, some anyway.
Yeah, I would guess Harris does smoke marijuana. That's why she changed her stance on it. We all remember the Breakfast Club interview where she admitted she smoked marijuana in college. Half her family is from Jamaica, which is quite offensive, by the way. I mean, sure, it may make you look cool to the stoners out there, but as a politician admitting you smoked marijuana in college, then going on to prosecute against that same activity, is hypocrisy. And mind you, marijuana was illegal when she was in college, just like it was when she became a prosecutor, throwing people in jail for it. So the only thing you're proven is you uphold a double standard that many stoners actually don't appreciate anyway. But that's the typical pandering to the liberal base, you know, the Gen Z zombies who think that makes her hip or cool. It makes her a hypocrite, and that's the point. And now, along with cokehead Tim Walz, she's in favor of legalizing recreational marijuana. The term recreational means nothing, my friends. Don't be fooled by that. The intention behind legalizing marijuana across the board is to dumb down society, make them lose motivation, aspirations, and simply become hapless slackers, stuck on TikTok trying to compete for the dumbest viral video. Damn, that's already happening. The gray area, of course, is the classic counter-argument, well, tobacco is legal and it kills millions of Americans every year, or alcohol is legal and millions of people die from drunk drivers every year. Do something about it then. Don't use it as a straw man point. It's a point, but nothing has changed, so you don't truly care about it. Tim Walz wants to destroy America. I think that is evident. He will be obliterated in the vice presidential debate, and I even see him losing his cool and saying something outrageous. Walz is a communist who's using the dynamic of inclusion and all the woke rhetoric to slither his communist policies into American politics. This is a code red alert. He's out in front for the nation to see. A complete psychopath. He makes Harris look quite sophisticated. And if that was the plan, well, it worked. But her policies? Yes, her policies can't be changed. Although she cunningly tried to sneak out the back door on them, nope, you can't escape that easily. Harris has nowhere to hide in her presidential debates against Trump. The American people will not fall for all the typical tropes used against Trump. It's become outdated and futile. Being a woman doesn't exempt you from being blasted in the debates. Being a woman of color doesn't exempt you from being blasted in the debates. Being a woman of color who made history, becoming the first woman of color as vice president, doesn't exempt you from being blasted in the debates. Harris bit off more than she could chew. I guess she had the munchies. Hey, we're kidding around, but this election will determine a lot. Either Harris will be destroyed, which will magnify that she was in fact a DEI hire, no qualifications, just thrown in there based on identity politics, or Harris will become the first DEI president of the United States. Either way, the Democrats are screwed. Their ticket is basically pushing for a Gen Z's utopia of genderless, dumbed down and drugged up society, of enraged and bitter young people who have lost all sense of reality and feel entitled to your hard-earned tax dollars. Yep, that's pretty much their target voting base. And it seems there's a cycle playing out in the Democratic Party, because Harris will be just like old Joe as president, with her vice president being cokehead Tim Walz, actually influencing decisions in the shadows. Something tells me, regardless if they make it or not, Tim Walz has some China connections he wants to introduce into the equation. You can't trust a man who doesn't have inhibitions, meaning he doesn't care how reckless he is. Then again, I guess he is the existential mascot for the Democratic Party. right?
Yeah, he's like the representation of all that encapsulates the progressives. We know there are factions, but see, that's the problem with Democrats. There are radicals on the far right, yet they don't really impact policy as much as the radicals on the left. For example, a radical governor signing executive orders to kidnap. Yes, it is actually kidnapping of children from parents who disagree with gender affirmation ideology. And the hypocrisy, because this same left blabbers about how government should not tell a woman what to do with her body, yet they are invading households and kidnapping children from parents. And then there's more. How can they even care about those children in so-called gender affirmation relations when they don't even care about human beings being developed in a woman's body? A child cannot request a sex change without someone putting that in their brains, which is sick, complete sickness. Yet Tim Walz condones it, and Harris is going to be held accountable for that in her debates. This will be bad, because I don't think the whole women's rights stance Harris has will be her advantage. If you don't stand on actual policies that benefit the majority of American citizens, such as the economy, women's rights becomes a desperate attempt to appeal to women as a crutch to cover for no real policy proposals. And let's be honest, women are not too excited about men punching on women in the sport of boxing. Harris and Walz push for this madness, and the women's rights that basically her campaign is running on becomes anti-women's rights, with one example. So it's disgusting. But in the radical world of progressives and liberals, there's nothing wrong with it. Respect their pronouns. How about respecting actual women by not letting a burly man pummel her in front of the entire world in the Olympics? Feminists, are you out there? Hello? This was your time to defend your fellow sister, right? Oh, but you can't defend her because it would contradict your beliefs of defending the psycho who pretended to be a woman. See, this is the left's self-inflicting behavior and practices. And I can say in confidence that the majority of American citizens do not ascribe to the madhouse. Harris has bitten off more than she can chew, and I believe the ship will officially go down for Democrats this time. Vance will destroy Walz, who will sense he's getting humiliated and say something absurd because, he's a psychopath. Trump will destroy Harris, and like many of her interviews, she will be stumped and can't rebuttal effectively. Because, the brain can't generate a logical response when the person can't avoid the facts. This creates the stuttering, the pauses, the deflections, the straw man points, and it will be a clean sweep so clear to the American people, even Democrats will have to hold their heads down in embarrassment.
And get a load of this. Kamala Harris just recently proposed a no tax on tips bill. Not a bad idea, except for the fact that Trump had already proposed it. Wow, yet the mainstream media somehow pretended as if Harris came up with that idea. Of course, this is the magic pixie dust sprinkled on their network. Even more disturbing is it highlights that Harris does not have an actual policy she can propose to the American citizens. In her rallies, sure, the zombies will just cheer her on, regardless of what she's blabbering about. But when it comes to the presidential debates, how will she propose a no tax on tips bill to the American people as one of her policies when it's literally from her opponent? That's one problem. Then you have proposals about the border crisis, which she really has a steep hill to climb. No effective plan or results to this point of being the border czar, visited Central American countries to, quote, get to the root cause of the problem. This current administration offered to pay those countries billions of dollars, and yet millions of illegal immigrants still came to the country. As for the economy, not sure how she can propose anything close to effective when she contributed to the current inflation. We haven't heard anything about helping the Black community out, right? All of these rallies, she's front and center in front of her supporters. But again, just more ultra-liberal nonsense. Harris hasn't had an interview up to this point because everyone knows she has to face the tough questions about her policies, her vice presidency, and the key element, what will she do for the Black community? Harris is running away, being kept in the basement, just like old Joe. If you were genuine, you wouldn't be hiding from the media. And the Black people who have backed her are starting to realize how Democrats don't care about Black people. Shout out to Kanye West.
Well, that's what happens when you spend all of your time obsessing over identity politics instead of politics itself. This is the chaos sector,